of the words of the prophet Isaiah. The voice of one crying out in the wilderness. Prepare the way of the Lord. Make his paths straight. Fill every valley, and every mountain and hill will be made low. And the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough ways made smooth. And all flesh shall see the salvation of God. You probably hadn't thought that the Christmas story was also a story of John the Baptist. But indeed, our passage for the second Sunday of Advent comes from the story of John the Baptist, the feisty prophet in the wilderness, as you might remember him, the man preparing the way. Jesus and John, according to Luke, which is our story of today, are related through their mothers. Some translations say cousins, some just say related, so take it what you will. And while the story of John is not your typical image of Christmas, I believe there is a lot to learn about the Christmas season from our wilderness prophet. So let's begin with him, but long before his days as a prophet, back to the very beginning before John was even born. Our story begins with four main characters: Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth, Mary and her soon-to-be husband Joseph. These four people are about to embark on a journey that will forever change their lives. Zechariah is the first to make a speaking appearance. He is a priest chosen to go into the Lord's temple. And as many of you may remember from previous sermons or other things that you've encountered, being in the temple is a very high honor indeed. Very few people are allowed to go in, even though they're priests. Unfortunately for Zechariah, when he enters the Holy of Holies, he encounters an angel. And it is not unfortunate that he encounters the angel Gabriel, as Gabriel brings news that he and his wife Elizabeth are going to have a baby. And this is kind of odd because they're long past age for having children. The problem becomes because, well, as a result of being in this Holy of Holies with this angel and asking the wrong questions, Zechariah loses his voice. This is a little harsh of a punishment, if you ask me, from Gabriel, but I would also like to keep my voice for the duration of this sermon, so I will continue with only that small side. Elizabeth does indeed conceive as the angels foretold, and Zechariah at this point still has no voice. Mary meets the same angel, Gabriel, and she is told that she should not be afraid, that she will also have a baby, but this baby will be by the Holy Spirit. However, Gabriel allows her to keep her voice, so she can have more of a speaking part later in our story. And while Joseph doesn't have much of a speaking part, we can probably imagine how the conversation might have gone between him and Mary after he heard about these events. Joseph, honey, there's something I should tell you right now. Post haste. I've been an awful good girl. Joseph, baby. Don't be mad, I'm kind of pregnant by the Holy Spirit. I'm having a kid. It's God's. What are you going to do? At this point, Mary is waiting to have a baby. And you can bet she is nervous. And Joseph is certainly stressed by this whole situation. Elizabeth is waiting to see what's going to become of all this having a baby in her later years. And Zechariah is waiting for his voice to come back. Here our four characters stand on the brink of, well, a lot of waiting. Everyone is waiting. Probably not too much different from ourselves this time of year. All of us are in various forms of waiting for our packages to arrive so we can wrap them for Christmas. That's my favorite part. I love that. Waiting for the family plan. So, because we all have that relative who just has to have everything this exact way, and maybe you are that relative. At church, we've been waiting to see what becomes of the lamplight stroll and great reading, by the way. We are all waiting, very much like our friends in Act 1. Waiting to see what will come of this Christmas season. Unfortunately for Matthew and for Mary, waiting does not mean kicking their feet up in their luxurious sand hut, preparing for baby Jesus to make some appearance. It means riding on a donkey across the desert to be counted in the census in Nazareth. Talk about a terrible way to wait in the meantime. But in the same way that our senior PF advisors can hardly sit still for 2 minutes, and they're crazy, they always have to have something planned for them, and they're running around like chickens. This congregation, I think, is a lot of the same way in some ways. We have 1,000 things that we're doing. We're waiting, but we're doing things. We see that waiting isn't always necessarily this process of idly standing around. Waiting is a part of the journey itself. For the church community, the season of Advent embodies that journey towards Christmas, towards the birth of the Christian tradition. In other words, we are waiting, but there's a lot going on in the meantime. Fast forward to baby Jesus. Mary has just had this huge journey on the back of this donkey. And let's face it, it was probably a pretty bumpy donkey. Because it doesn't matter how padded a donkey is when you're riding across the desert and pregnant, that's going to be uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Joseph is probably equally as exhausted. Imagine your pregnant wife riding through town on a donkey. That's not going to be comfortable for anybody. Then they arrive in this town that they have been ordered to travel to, and they can't find her. Nobody was waiting for their arrival. So they're stuck in this stable. And then she has baby Jesus. Talk about a journey of waiting. When we often reminisce about this particular scene in popular retellings, we are reminded of the tranquility and softness of the moment. they are not in the story of Luke. However, the Magi have also always been favorites, so they will make a special guest appearance. They will require audience participation momentarily. We three kings of Orient are not in Luke or Mark or John. In the book of Matthew you will find us following yonder star. We aren't three kings from Orient are. We could have been more or even less. Someone thought three gifts meant three kings, but nobody knows. Sing it with me. Star of wonder, star of light, star of royal beauty bright, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to that perfect night. But this story is really the story of John the Baptist. And here we are, back where we started. While Mary and Joseph were beginning their new chapter as parents, Elizabeth and Zachariah had moved from one waiting journey to another, raising their son, John. You see, before Jesus was born, Elizabeth gives birth to John, Zachariah gets his voice back. It's pretty sad. And we know how this journey progresses. Eventually, we find John living out in the wilderness, preparing the way. He baptizes people, challenges some of the social norms of the day, eats locusts and honey. You know, the usual. He prepares the way for the messages that Jesus has to offer us. John is the focus of this story because, in many ways, we are a lot like John. Or more specifically, we are the modern day, we're called to be the modern day John the Baptists, preparing the way in our own time and space during this Advent season. And preparations don't necessarily look the same for everyone. If we look at our esteemed cast, we see that they each had their own journeys for which to prepare. Mary and Elizabeth, Mary and Joseph, Elizabeth and Zachariah prepare for parenthood and the journey of a growing family, the anxiety and joy that comes with all of that. The angels prepared these families with glad and surprising news. The shepherds are also prepared for their role. And the shepherds, even though you couldn't call them prepared, said yes to a heavenly invitation. The Magi, regardless of where they're located, have been preparing for this journey for a very long time. And then we're back to John. The hope, the beauty, the resilience of this story relies in its spectrum. There is this interplay between the magic of these miraculous circumstances of tiny children, of brave mothers and fathers, of a night in the stable of prophets, and magi of talking angels and opening heavens. And then on the other hand, the ways in which we can relate to these characters ourselves. When we find ourselves laughing, as I really believe these stories are meant to be experienced with the full spectrum of human emotion, with us laughing or saying, gosh, I know exactly what that feels like. The parts where we're sitting on the edge of our seat, waiting to see what happens next. And yes, even in those moments when we're reminded of our own heaviness, of the struggles of loved ones, of pain and violence, of the out-of-control things that are happening in the world around us, the moments into which our own tears crowd. Where are you, Christ? season. We prepare ourselves. We prepare others. We prepare for others. A lot like John. Perhaps we have even been waiting for this journey all year long. We too then are a part of this story. As we find ways that we relate to these Christmas stories, these stories find ways to relate to us. Each season is a little different, isn't it? Each year, or maybe even every few years, Christmas means something a little bit different. Maybe we are in a different place. Maybe we aren't with the people that we want to be with. Maybe we just aren't prepared for Christmas to arrive again. And that is all right too. The Christmas story offers us a place to connect to the story, where whether we are new parents, or the grouchy donkey, or the surprise-bearing angels, the Christmas story can meet us right where we are at. And that is the real magic for me. That Jesus can meet us right where we are at in any moment that we are in. Jesus is big enough to sit with us through our grief and through our joy, or even through our indifference. And maybe if we sit with that, we can understand and experience what it means to have God lift us just a little bit. And maybe lift us for more than just a moment. Let us leave this place then, like John, ready to share our story. To cry out in the wilderness. To prepare the way in our own way, because Christmas is here with us. Christmas will come again. It will reach out its hand and offer us a new glimpse. Let us share the story of Jesus, who is with us as we prepare for his coming, no matter where we are in our own journeys.